Navratilova, a champion of LGBT rights, is a member of the Women's Sports Policy Working Group, pushing for fairness and safety for females instead of blanket transgender inclusion or exclusion in women's sports.
Leah spoke to Sports Illustrated recently and says, I am a woman. I should be competing on the women's team. Do you agree with that?
Everybody wants to swim as a female because it's an easier field, I think, to compete in. Leah, I don't agree that she should be allowed to swim, but again, she's going by the rules. So the rules need to change. The rules need to change because this is not a fair fight. If I was a female swimmer, I don't have a chance. I really don't have a chance to be competing against Leah.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to cover this story because I think it gives great insight into the mindset of people who want biological males competing in women's sports. And it helps us understand their mentality in terms of how they see themselves compared to biological females. It appears they don't really see themselves as any different, and they want us to not see them as any different. Now that's pretty obvious, but when you see it in real life, when you see examples of this, it's mind-blowing. People really believe that once you declare that you identify as a woman and you're a male, you're a biological male, you become a biological woman, not just someone who identifies as a woman, but you actually become a biological woman. Again, not just somebody who considers themselves, a woman, not even just a trans woman, but an actual woman who is the same as a female. Many people actually believe that. Now, Martina Navratilova, she had an encounter with one such person online recently, and she did a good job of putting them in their place and sending them back to reality in no uncertain terms. Now, Martina Navratilova, former, tennis champion, she is somebody who's also, incidentally, part of the LGBTQ community. But the difference is she doesn't make her, sexuality her identity. She doesn't make that the be-all and end-all, where everybody has to hear about it every 5 minutes. People just see her as, a tennis champion, a legend in the sport. And first and foremost, she is an athlete, and she knows what it takes to compete at the highest level as a woman. She knows what that takes. And she sees the differences between men and women. She's experienced that because she is a woman, and she's in a field where men and women are separated. Unless it's mixed doubles, but even then, that's balanced out. So it's not men against women, so to speak. And yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous where we are today. It's delusion, straight up delusion. And we need to do our part to keep people, to give people a reality check. Otherwise, we will all lose touch with reality. We'll be living in a clown world, which is kind of what's happening. But thank goodness for people who are the voice of reason, especially in women's sports. So let's take a look. Trans-identifying activist India Willoughby claimed to be more female than women's tennis star Martina Navratilova, and the tennis great was only too happy to return that serve. The spat apparently began when Navratilova defended the use of the term trans-identifying male to describe a person who self-identified as a transgender woman. So quote tweeting John Pike, Martina tweeted, "Trans-identifying males is not a transphobic buzz phrase, as Suze puts it, but rather a biological fact. Also, it makes it much easier to understand who is, who and how they started. Where they end up can change, but biology doesn't change, ever." Absolutely. Absolute facts there. So Willoughby took offense to this, claiming that, transitioning genders is legal, and accused Navratilova of intentionally using transphobic language. So Willoughby said, "Calling someone a trans-identified male rather than simply a woman is about as transphobic as it gets. You okay with this? Philip Burney 1. She knows what she's doing, and so do you. Navratilova is also wrong. Someone who transitions is factually and legally a biological female." What about physically, though? Are they physically a biological female? Oh, here we go with this argument. Biology absolutely changes, My body chemistry is more female than Martina's. Wow. My anatomy is female. The fact Martina and other bigots refuse to acknowledge me or any woman who happens to be trans is deeply offensive. If it sticks in her craw so much, she shouldn't be commentating. That doesn't even make sense. Kind of sounds like you would love for her to lose her platform by saying that she shouldn't be commentating. How convenient. When she's simply doing exactly what India is doing, tweeting and giving their take on these matters. Martina's not doing anything different, so why should she not be commentating? Taking synthetic hormones doesn't change your biology. It just means your body has to adapt and accommodate these external factors that you are imposing on it. It doesn't change your biology. You're still male. If you were born male, that's what you're going to be. And even when your skeleton is examined by archaeologists in the future, you're going to be classed as male. And Martina's response was very simple. And this is the best way to respond to people like this. This is the best way to respond to delusional people. Keep the engagement to a minimum. India never was and never will be female. Exactly. If you want to call yourself saying you identify as a woman, okay. If you want to call yourself a trans woman, okay. But to say that you are now female is completely false. And you will never be female. That's not how it works. Taking synthetic hormones doesn't give you a womb, doesn't give you a uterus, doesn't give you the biology of a female. And of course, now I'm not saying that, that's the only thing that makes up a woman before people start coming with that nonsense. But biologically, that's what a human female is typically born with. And if they don't have those parts, whether they had them removed at a later date, via surgery, again, usually for conditions that only affect women, that biological males will never experience. They're still a woman, they're still female. And if there's something happened when they were born, again, that's considered an abnormality, but they're still female. Okay, so that was in response to Phoebe, who said, "Oh, just the man, India Willoughby, saying his body chemistry is more female than the woman, Martina. Honestly, I despair at the BS he spouts on here." And then another response was, by India. "The NHS actual doctors recognise me. They're not confused. So why can't Martina Navratilova? It's bigotry and prejudice. By using Martina and Sharon Davis, you are condoning it and disregarding the trans and LGBT plus community." At Philip Burney 1. Be more Harry Kane. The activist who has also attacked author J.K. Rowling for defending biological women in the past went on to claim that the BBC Sports head Philip Burney was condoning bigotry for allowing Navratilova to comment on the network. Again, this is how they operate. They don't want you to speak. They don't want you to have a voice. Martina Navratilova, this is a woman speaking on behalf of other female athletes. And apparently she shouldn't even be allowed to have a platform. She shouldn't be allowed to exercise her free speech. Everybody else can, though. Anybody who agrees with me, apparently, if you're part of the LGBTQ, even though technically Martina is part of that community, but, unless you agree with me, you shouldn't even have a platform. That's how these people operate. And doctors have to recognize everybody. They can't be blind to the needs of their patients. Clearly, that's their job, is to recognize everybody, regardless of, various background, race, religion, male, female, whatever. But obviously they're trained in specialties. Now, a doctor is not going to recognize a biological male as a female. They may recognize you as somebody who identifies as a woman, but they're not going to recognize you as a female if they are actually a doctor who passed everything. There's no way they're going to recognize you as a female. It's really ridiculous. And if they do, they're just buying into the lie and really shouldn't be treating people, especially women. They should just go, specialize in gender reassignment. That's what they should specialize in and leave the women alone. Because women need their resources, especially, with the NHS. And we can't afford to now have to compete for those resources with biological males, with men. So again, I hope this person is not going to gynecologists. Go to the doctor by all means, but please do not waste resources by going to gynecologists and then calling them transphobic if they don't acknowledge you as an actual biological female, which you will never be, as Martina rightly said.
In 2019, I believe you came out and gave your position that transgender women athletes should not be allowed to compete as women. Has your position changed at all, or is that still your belief?
So I educated myself and said, okay, I'm going to learn a lot more about everything and how it all works, even though I thought I knew more than most people because of Renee Richards, who has been a lifelong friend. And came to the same conclusion pretty much, that we try to include transgender women as much as possible, but it needs to be fair.
You personally have been labeled a TERF. You've been labeled transphobic. Do you consider those definitions accurate, or those descriptions
No,
accurate?
of course not. Of course they're not accurate. I'm not scared, nor am I exclusionary or any of that. I welcome all athletes. I love competing, so I understand that people want to compete and want that opportunity. The climate is such that people can't speak out or even ask questions. And then the athletes themselves are not allowed to speak out. They've been warned to be quiet. They've been warned to not say anything. They may lose their scholarship. Who knows how they would be punished. In normal society, in everyday life, absolutely 100% inclusion. When it comes to sport, we have categories based on biology. And, that's pretty much that.
And I like what she said. She's not scared of anybody. So I don't know where the term phobic comes from. And, the term TERF. And she doesn't believe in excluding anybody, addressing the term TERF, like people want to exclude trans women from sports. No, sports is a great activity to be involved in. It helps people in so many ways. It helped me when I was growing up. I would never say somebody should be excluded, from competing in sports. But in sports, there are categories, as Martina said, that are based on biology. There are categories that are there for a reason. And that doesn't change just because somebody wants to identify as something. Now, I've noticed that nobody cares about trans men. Once again, women get the short end of the stick. Nobody cares about trans men being included. They can't compete with biological males for the most part. They're not going to be up there on the podium with men. They're not. So how are they going to be included? How are they going to compete in sports if they want to compete in the category they identify with? That's not going to be possible for them. Not on any, sort of professional level, at least. Even at an amateur level, really. It's unlikely. So, but nobody's talking about including them and making sure they're not excluded. I don't hear people go on about that. So yeah, very interesting interview. And this is somebody who beat 2 types of cancer, throat cancer, breast cancer. She's a former athlete, and she's actually, fought for LGBTQ rights. But for some reason, this trans activist thinks it's progressive to disrespect her and say that somebody who was born male is now more female than she is. Not a good look to be disrespecting her like that. And this is what we see with a lot of these trans activists. Not only are they disrespectful, some of them have been violent towards women. We've seen what happened with Kelly J. Keane. We've seen what happened with Riley Gaines. Both women, have had to deal with violence from these activists. And this is why people say this is another form of misogyny. And this is what women are dealing with in 2023. So do you think Martina did a good job at putting this person in their place? Or do you think that, a biological male can change their biology and become female? More female than the women who were born female, apparently. Do you think that's possible? So thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.